The dust kicked up behind Jake's motorcycle as he took the river road for the 1000th time. He'd ridden this route so often he could do it blindfolded. Every curve, every pothole, every mile marker burned into his memory. But on this particular September evening, everything was about to change. The sun hung low over the Willamette River, painting the water in shades of amber and gold. Jake throttled down as he approached the old bridge, more out of habit than caution. That's when he saw her. She stood at the riverbank knee-deep in the water, her jeans rolled up to her calves. But it wasn't a casual wade. She was frantically reaching for something, her movements desperate and frantic. Then he heard it, a child's scream, barely audible over his engine. Jake killed the motor and threw down the kickstand in one fluid motion. His boots hit the gravel running. "Help!" the woman shouted, finally noticing him. "My daughter, she can't swim." About 20 feet from shore, a small head bobbed in the current, arms flailing. The river looked calm from the road, but Jake knew better. The undercurrent here was vicious, especially after last week's rain. He didn't think. He just moved. Jake hit the water fully clothed, his leather jacket immediately becoming a weight, trying to drag him down. He shrugged it off mid-stroke, his eyes locked on the little girl. She went under once, twice. The current was pulling her toward the deeper channel. His high school swimming medals meant nothing out here. This wasn't a pool with lanes and lifeguards. This was raw nature, indifferent to human life. The girl surfaced again, coughing, her face a mask of terror. Jake pushed harder, his muscles screaming. His fingers finally grasped her wrist. She latched onto him with surprising strength, nearly pulling them both under. "I've got you," he gasped. "Stop fighting. I've got you." He flipped onto his back, securing the child against his chest, and began the exhausting journey back to shore. The current fought him every inch. His legs burned, his lungs felt ready to burst. The woman was chest deep in the water now, reaching for them. Other hands joined hers. A fisherman from upstream had seen the commotion. Together, they pulled Jake and the girl onto the muddy bank. The child coughed up river water, crying, "Alive." The woman collapsed beside her daughter, sobbing, checking her over with trembling hands. Jake lay on his back, staring at the sky, his chest heaving. He'd done it. They were okay. "You saved her." The woman's voice cracked as she looked at him, mascara running down her cheeks, her wet hair plastered to her face. "You saved my baby?" "Anyone would have," Jake started, but she cut him off. "No, not anyone." She pulled her daughter close, kissing the top of her head repeatedly. "Thank you. God, thank you." The fisherman called 911, and within minutes an ambulance arrived. The paramedics checked the little girl, Emma her name was, and declared her miraculously unharmed, shaken, but physically fine. "You should get checked too," one of the EMTs told Jake. "That current's no joke. You swallowed any water?" "I'm fine," Jake insisted, wringing out his shirt. His motorcycle still sat on the shoulder, his soaked leather jacket lying somewhere at the bottom of the river. The woman, she'd introduced herself as Sarah, sat in the back of the ambulance with Emma wrapped in a blanket. She kept looking over at Jake, something unreadable in her eyes. As the EMTs packed up, Sarah approached him. Up close, even exhausted and waterlogged, she was striking, but it wasn't her appearance that caught him. It was the fierce protectiveness in her eyes, the way she kept one hand on Emma's shoulder, even from 10 feet away. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "We just moved here last week. I didn't know about the current. We were just supposed to be looking at the sunset and—" Her voice broke. "She saw a turtle and went after it, and then—" "Hey," Jake said softly. "She's okay. That's what matters. Can I at least buy you dinner? New clothes? Anything?" Jake glanced at his waterlogged boots, his ruined phone. "Honestly, I'm just glad I took this route today. I usually cut through town on Tuesdays." "That's fate," Sarah said quietly. "Or luck. Or something more." Jake did accept her offer for coffee that weekend, mostly because she'd shown up at the motorcycle shop where he worked with Emma in tow, carrying a plate of homemade cookies. Emma had drawn him a picture, a stick figure pulling another stick figure out of blue squiggles. You're the hero, Emma announced proudly, pointing at the larger stick figure. Coffee turned into a long conversation. Sarah was a widow, he learned. Her husband had died in a car accident 2 years ago. She'd moved to Oregon from Texas for a fresh start, a new job at the university. Emma's been my whole world since Mark died, Sarah said, watching her daughter color at the next table. When I saw her go under, I've never felt so helpless. Jake understood helplessness. He'd felt it when his kid brother died of leukemia 10 years ago. He'd been 17, completely powerless to change anything. It had derailed his life for years. Dropped out of college, drifted from job to job, kept everyone at arm's length. Saving lives became his obsession after that, in small ways. He'd gotten his EMT certification, volunteered with search and rescue for a while, but he'd never been in the right place at the right time to truly make a difference until the Riverbank. Over the following months, Jake found himself drawn into Sarah and Emma's orbit. It started innocently, helping them move furniture, fixing Emma's broken bicycle, showing them the good hiking trails, but somewhere along the way, it became more. Sarah made him laugh in a way he hadn't in years. She challenged him, pushed back on his cynicism, saw through his walls, and Emma, bright, chattering, fearless Emma, reminded him what it felt like to be needed. She has nightmares sometimes, Sarah confided one evening after Emma had gone to bed. They were sitting on her porch, nursing beers. About the water, she wakes up scared. That's normal, Jake said. Trauma takes time. She asks for you, Sarah added quietly. When she's scared, she wants to know if you're coming over soon. You make her feel safe. Jake's chest tightened. Sarah, I know this is complicated, she interrupted, and I'm not trying to rush anything, but you need to know you've changed our lives, both of us, not just that day, but every day since. He looked at her, really looked at her. In the porch light, with the September breeze moving her hair, she was beautiful. But more than that, she was brave. She'd rebuilt her life once already. She was willing to take another chance, to let someone in. The walls he'd built for a decade suddenly felt exhausting to maintain. I'm not good at this, Jake admitted. People, relationships. I've spent 10 years keeping everyone at a distance. Why? Because people leave, they die, they disappoint you. It's easier to be alone. Sarah reached across the space between their chairs and took his hand. That's not living, Jake. That's just surviving. Maybe I'm only good at surviving. The man who dove into a river without hesitation to save a stranger's child. That man is good at a lot more than surviving. The turning point came on a cold November evening. Jake was at the shop late, finishing a rebuild, when his phone rang. Sarah's number. Jake. Her voice was small, scared. I'm at the hospital. Emma had a seizure. They're running tests. Could you come? He made it to the hospital in 15 minutes, probably breaking several traffic laws. Sarah was in the waiting room looking smaller than he'd ever seen her. He sat beside her and she immediately leaned into him, her carefully maintained composure crumbling. They think it might be epilepsy, she whispered. They're doing an EEG. She's so scared, Jake, and I can't lose her. I can't go through that again. You won't, Jake said firmly, wrapping his arm around her. Emma's strong, you're strong, and whatever this is, you won't face it alone. She looked up at him, tears streaming. Promise? It was the easiest promise he'd ever made. Promise. They sat there for hours while doctors ran tests. Jake held her hand, got her terrible coffee from vending machines, and waited. When they finally let Sarah back to see Emma, Jake started to hang back, but Emma called out, Jake, I want Jake too. He looked at Sarah, who nodded. Together they went to Emma's bedside. The little girl looked tiny in the hospital bed, wires attached to her head, but she smiled when she saw them. Hi. The doctor said I had a spark party in my brain. Jake had to laugh despite everything. A spark party, huh? Yeah. But it's okay. Mom says sometimes bodies do weird things. Your mom's smart. Emma reached out with both hands, one to her mother, one to Jake. You're both here. That makes me not scared. Sarah's eyes met Jake's over Emma's bed. In that moment, something settled between them, an unspoken understanding. They were a unit now, a family. Emma's diagnosis was epilepsy, manageable with medication. The seizures became rare, then stopped. Life found a new rhythm. Jake moved in with Sarah and Emma the following spring. He'd been spending so much time there anyway, it felt silly to maintain two places. Emma helped him pack, chattering excitedly about how they'd decorate his room, even though everyone knew he'd be sharing Sarah's. Are you going to be my dad now? Emma asked one evening, characteristically direct. Jake crouched down to her level. I'd like to be if that's okay with you, but I'll never try to replace your first dad. He'll always be your dad too. Emma considered this seriously. Can I have two dads? One in heaven and one here? Absolutely. Okay, then yes. She threw her arms around his neck. You're my dad too. They got married that October, exactly 1 year after the Riverbank. It was a small ceremony on the same spot where Jake had pulled Emma from the water. They'd turned it into something beautiful, their beginning instead of an almost ending. As Jake stood with Sarah at the altar, Emma bouncing excitedly as their flower girl, he thought about all the things that had to align perfectly for this moment to exist. If he'd taken his usual route, if he'd been 5 minutes earlier or later, if he'd hesitated even a second longer, life, he'd learned, balanced on the edge of 1,000 small decisions. I never thought I'd get a second chance at happiness, Sarah whispered during their first dance. Me neither, Jake admitted. I was just going through the motions, surviving like you said. And now, he pulled her closer, watching Emma dance with Sarah's father across the floor. Now I'm living, really living. You taught me that. You saved my daughter's life, Sarah said, her eyes bright with tears. But you saved mine too. We saved each other, Jake corrected, because that's what it was, a rescue that went both ways. Sarah and Emma had pulled him from a different kind of drowning, the slow suffocation of a life lived in fear of loss and pain. 5 years later, Jake still rode past the riverbank regularly, but now he did it with Emma on the back of his bike, her laughter ringing out as they took the curves. Sarah would be waiting at home, probably with dinner in the oven and paint on her hands from whatever art project she was working on. Sometimes he'd slow down at the spot where everything changed. Emma would always squeeze his waist a little tighter, remembering, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was gratitude. One ordinary September evening had split his life into before and after. Before, he'd been drowning in his own way. After, he'd found his reason to swim. Love you, Dad, Emma would say as they pulled into the driveway. And every single time, Jake marveled at those two words. Dad. The title he'd never expected. The life he'd never imagined. All because he took the river road on a Tuesday. All because he didn't hesitate. All because sometimes the moment that changes everything looks like just another mile marker on a road you've traveled 1,000 times before.